this going viral. So anyway, thanks everyone for joining. Again, I'm Sheila Rabin. I'm the ORCID US Community Specialist at Lyrasis. I'm also going to share my screen just to give an overview of today's discussion. So we're all just coming together with the idea of sharing and having some just informal discussion and hearing from each other around ORCID and also DOIs and persistent identifiers in general, but primarily ORCID in the law scholarship community. So the main goal of this call is really to think about integrating ORCID into law scholarship workflows and what that's going to take, which it would be some individuals adopting ORCID, so your law faculty, maybe students, but anyone who's really doing a good deal of research in the law field. That's also going to be talking around integrating ORCID with different systems that you might be using. And also how to get data into your faculty's ORCID records. We're going to talk about all of this, and just in general, incorporating ORCID IDs and DOIs into law scholarship wherever we can. Why do we want to do this? Why are we talking about this? Well, I've heard a lot about for example, the law school rankings that go on and how US News is planning for a new scholarly impact ranking. So that is kind of a big motivator behind this. I know everybody has been working very hard to make sure that all of your law faculty's information around the works that they're putting out and their activities is up to date and accurate. So looking to these persistent identifiers to get better, more accurate metadata around basically who's doing what, and trying to find a solution for more like streamlining that data collection process and reporting process that many of you I've heard are going through and having to kind of manually check and report and do all of this. So basically, we're all just on the same page in terms of looking for solutions around making these reporting processes easier, more accurate, more sustainable, and leveraging some of the technology that we already have to do that. So I'm just giving this brief little overview before we jump in to our guest presenters today. I'm going to just highlight again that US News Scholarly Impact Rankings, and one of the motivators behind these discussions has to do with the fact that data can be read and written to and from somebody's ORCID record from all sorts of various systems, can be connected with ORCID. And one of the systems that has connected with ORCID so far is Hein Online, as I'm sure everybody knows or at least has heard by now. Hein Online has integrated with ORCID. So with the author profiles in Hein Online, it's now possible for each author to connect their ORCID ID to their author profile, so they have that persistent, unique identifier for their name and their identity that they can connect with their Hein Online profile. They log into their ORCID record to verify their identity. They can register for an ORCID record if they don't already have one. Hein Online will ask them for permission to connect with their ORCID ID, which is what you're seeing here. And then once that ORCID ID is connected in Hein Online, you can actually have all of your works that are in Hein Online sent to your ORCID record for you. So that's what you're seeing here. The individual gets a chance to select which works they want to write to their Hein Online profile, to their ORCID record from Hein Online. And you'll see here an example of somebody who has done this, and they actually have the source of their works data in ORCID coming from Hein Online. Let's see, I think that's all I want to talk about right now. We're going to hear from our guest speakers, our featured speakers, around more context behind this. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to introduce Erin Ratine from Texas A&M, who's going to give us a little case study about what they've done at Texas A&M in terms of ORCID. So perfect, Erin, I can see your screen. I'm going to mute myself, and don't forget to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Sheila. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can get this to go. Okay, great. So yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about the ORCID outreach and adoption strategies we did at Texas A&M University School of Law. So first of all, ORCID has been on my radar for a little bit. I started in 2015 at the Florida State University Office of Digital Research and Scholarship. And it was there at the main campus academic library that I really learned about what ORCID was and its ability to solve author name disambiguation issues, and also integrate with the digital object identifier system, which allowed faculty to quickly and easily add and manage publications to their ORCID profile. The thing was there that the primary audience was not law scholars, or in fact, no law scholars really came into that library because we had a really strong legal law library there. So in 2017, I actually joined the Texas A&M Law faculty as the Digital Services and Repository Librarian, and I was super excited to roll out ORCIDs and DOIs to my whole faculty. One issue was that there was a general lack of like updated scholarly communications practices within legal scholarship from what I found in terms of integrating with online platforms and other just online scholarly communication practices. There were like few student-run journals that used DOIs, and still today that's the case. Not many faculty knew about ORCIDs or DOIs. And from some of my experiences and conversations with other librarians, the concept of embedded librarianship within student-run journals was not really widespread. So hopefully this conversation can dive into those issues and we can really turn that ship around. And at the same time, like many projects I'm being asked from 2017 and on, really they involved tasks like publication lists and impact data curation, profile updating, profile management. And all of these things I noticed would benefit by being able to leverage this growing digital publication infrastructure of platforms, APIs that are built around persistent identifiers like DOIs and ORCIDs. And in addition to the benefits that DOIs and ORCID offers authors, it's my view that librarians will also benefit from increasing the efficiency of managing faculty metadata. I'm sure I'm not the only one that kind of struggles with this repetitive metadata management, data entry task. And I really think that this is the answer to all of those repetitive time sinks. And in the same way, one huge complaint from my conversations with faculty about all of this kind of digital stuff, I put that in air quotes, is that there's a lot of time sink in this repetitive data entry. And for the most part, faculty will really roll their eyes if you ask them to keep on doing this. And we're at the point in 2020 where this is not the first author profile that people have encountered. And so it becomes an issue of really convincing them that this is the one profile to rule them all, for lack of a better phrase. So we really did, I'll say at the start, we had a lot of success at my law school rolling out ORCID. And in thinking about like, why was this so successful? And with this in mind, that if anybody involved in library initiatives or ScholarCom initiatives may know that it's kind of hard to get traction on some new things and try to get a whole faculty-wide adoption of some new thing. But here in this case, it was really great. But I think there are a lot of things that align that help push our ORCID adoption. And one of them is that our university is really improving its annual reporting systems. And those vendors are saying that it would be really helpful for them and us to be able to integrate with ORCID and DOI metadata. It will lower the costs of custom integrations and be able to kind of bring our department into the greater main campus infrastructure. Also, our main campus university library, they created a homegrown researcher information system, or RIS, and that's called Scholars at TAMU. And what's really cool about what they're doing is they're inviting every department outside of the university, like outside of the main campus, to participate in that. And it's been heavily promoted by that university library and also all of the research deans. And that system itself has a built-in ORCID API connection. And so that gave us a launching point to start there, introduce faculty, our law faculty, to this system, and then have them claim that profile and launch directly into the ORCID registration process. Another thing that really, I think, helped push this ORCID adoption is I received a lot of really great support from my library director, Lisa Goodman. She worked with me to plan this out and think through how we could pilot using ORCID profiles as a central hub of the author metadata, and I think that was really critical to the success. Also, right around the plan, we were kind of thinking about this before Hein Online announced their integration, and then all of a sudden we were pleasantly surprised that Hein Online did announce that. And so that, I think, really did help drive the adoption of our law faculty. So what we did initially was really inform people. We educated faculty about ORCID and advocated for its use at a faculty meeting. We were able to get, I think, about 5 or 10 minutes of time to present kind of the what is ORCID, how is it helpful conversation to them. And we set up a registration drive immediately following a future faculty meeting. Now, I thought this was very helpful because, at least at our school and before the coronavirus, we were all in a room at once. And so it was a great kind of captive audience moment, not gonna lie. And once we kind of said, hey, right after this faculty meeting ends, we're gonna have computers set up and we'll have librarians to help walk you through the registration process. We had over 60% of our faculty actually adopt ORCID right there and then. So I found that that was really helpful. And details related to that was we had IT set up monitors and computers so that with tables, computers, mice and keyboards, so that the faculty, especially some of the faculty who are not computer savvy, they needed a little bit of help and guidance to go through all the different clicks and all the different processes. And so I think they really appreciated that, and it seemed to really work well. In terms of staffing, we solicited support from 4 librarian volunteers, including myself, to help walk faculty through. And just to give you a sense of numbers, we had around 50 or 60 probably total faculty. So if you have more or less, you may need to adjust. So of course that left 40% of the faculty not adopting it. And so for those remaining people, we followed up individually over email. Now for the email, I tried to give everybody an out. In-person instructions if they wanted to go to a consultation, over Zoom, and again, this was before coronavirus, so even then I was trying to encourage the use of Zoom. And if they just wanted to do it themselves, easy to follow, step-by-step email instructions so that they could just, if they're too busy or don't want to set up a time, they can just go in and do it. In the email, I told them how little time it would take, because that was a big conversation ender, was, hey, do you have some time to set up your ORC? And it's like, oh no, I'm really busy right now. So, and that's okay, but this really just takes fewer than 5 minutes to do. It really does not take a long time, at least with the workflow that we were using. And I'll admit that for the in-person follow-up requests, it was more of a consultation and advocacy campaign. So these were the people who were initially skeptical, did not want to stay around to register, and that kind of showed in terms of the conversations. They really wanted to be convinced that, hey, this is going to be helpful for me. This isn't going to cause me more headaches. And if this is something the library will support, then sure, I'm on board. And so, we all as librarians need to manage those conversations to the best of our ability with our faculty. But I found that was helpful to be prepared in advance to kind of be able to answer those common questions. Also, we had swag. So Sheila really helpfully provided us with these ORCID information bookmark cards. I call them bookmarks. I'm not sure if that was the intention, but looked good and worked well, as well with pens and ORCID ID stickers. And we just kind of passed that out to faculty to supplement the information campaign. And as they registered, they would get like a pen and a sticker, and it was just a cool, tangible element to add to the whole thing. And this approach, like I said, it really allowed us to introduce our faculty to the main campus's new researcher information system, which nobody knows about. So because they had to go here to actually click this register or connect your ID button to that profile. And then that would let our RIS system kind of manage their ORCID interaction as well as the Hein Online. So we have multiple different sources set up already piping into the ORCID profile. And the idea, again, is to leverage all of this with other API connections and transfer metadata between services like bpress's repository or SSRN or a whole slew of other services. And so, everyone is going to have their own workflow. We were able to launch from Scholars at TAMU. And so you're just going to have to think through what is the best starting point for your institution, or maybe talk with Sheila or ORCID about getting your own institutional ORCID API integration. It's a lot of acronyms and it's a lot of words, but it really is not that difficult to set up. And I'm sure ORCID will be willing to help as well. One quick point to make was this trusted individual setting. Since we're doing one-on-one setting up and these profiles are owned by the scholar and not by the institution, in order for the library to help manage these profiles in a centralized type of way, you have to have somebody added as a trusted individual. Since I'm kind of directly involved in this, it was myself. And so I'm now added as a trusted individual to all of my faculty's ORCID profiles, which lets me just log into my profile and click their name and then manage their profile as if it was mine. So it is extremely easy to get centralized, even though it's not automatically set up that way. So some helpful takeaways from this whole thing. Taking time to explain what ORCID is and why it will benefit your faculty, it really does help with buy-in. A lot of this is in the abstract, and so I like to help reduce it to practical, hey, this is how it will help. Having those in-person sessions to walk through the registration process and the appointment of a trusted individual, I think was really paramount. I was a little nervous with the people who did it by themselves because I wasn't sure at the end of the day if they actually did it correctly. You have some feedback on the back end. If you log into your profile, you can see, oh, someone popped up. But at the end of the day, it is kind of nice to walk them through because there are a couple of things that might be a speed bump in the road, some of the form things that they ask for. So it's just helpful to have someone there to make sure that, hey, this is going okay. And explaining how ORCID can reduce that repetitive data entry task was very helpful in convincing the most skeptical faculty among my faculty. Begrudgingly, they kind of just adopted it and were like, okay, as long as this is gonna make my life easier, I'm with you. And again, that was kind of key for those faculty members. One cool follow-up I wanted to add here, that after our registration drive, I received some messages from a few faculty thanking the library for spearheading the initiative because they're being more and more involved in interdisciplinary work and projects, and they are actually requesting, and in some cases requiring ORCIDs from contributing authors. And this faculty member said that without our initiative, they would not have known what to do and might have pulled out of the project altogether. So it's already kind of gaining traction and gaining ground, so which is really great to hear. So here is just a little shameless plug. It's my view that as scholarly communications best practices continue to evolve and grow online and digitally, so must our publication workflows within the legal academy. There are pressures on administrators to make data-driven decisions, and those pressures continue to grow. The need for faculty to capture and demonstrate the impact on their work or of their work also grows. And then students who are on law journals and they're pursuing JDs and trying to get that experience, they're not largely tuned into these developments and scholarly communications best practices. And in my view, we all should look to law libraries as a stable source of information and guidance. And with that widespread adoption and implementation of the DOI system and ORCIDs for authors, it will improve overall discoverability of works, it will increase citations, make data collection and impact reporting easier, and among other things, it will just bring legal scholarship into the present and future of scholarly communications. So I have a work in progress paper that is almost finished and I'll be circulating really soon, and that's going to discuss all of this in greater detail. And my goal is to provide guidance for anybody who is unfamiliar with what a DOI is and how to create one. It is a rather technical process, but my goal, excuse me, is to have anybody with any level of experience pick it up and be able to start adding DOIs to their legal scholarship published at their institutions. So thanks so much for taking the time to listen to my experiences and my opinions.
Awesome, thanks, Aaron. And yes, as Aaron mentioned, definitely ORCID is very configurable, so do feel free to email me so we can talk more in depth about the specifics of your situation at your institution. And also for anyone who joined after I had posted this the last time, here's the link to our agenda. We're asking everyone, if you'd like to go in and add your name, you'll see the long list of names there. You can add your own name so that we can just know who all's here. And also, if you do have any questions or comments, please go ahead and post those into the chat. You'll see a button down at the bottom of the Zoom screen that has a chat, and you can just type your thoughts and questions there. In the interest of time, for the time being, we're going to now hear from Bonnie Shusha. Is that correct?
Shuka.
Okay.
Just close.
Who's also going to talk to us a little bit more about the Hein Online integration and just some insight around that. So Bonnie, feel free to go ahead and share your screen.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, thank you, Sheila, for inviting me to join the call. Bear with me as I share my desktop here. And Aaron, I have to say, I'm really impressed by what you guys have done at Texas A&M and getting this ORCID integration moving. I have to admit, I was not sold on, no offense, Sheila, until now about the need to push ORCID IDs for our law faculty, because as was, I think Aaron alluded to, DOIs are just not really used that much in law, and it was a hard sell for faculty on, because we had been meeting with our faculty ever since the US News Scholarly Impact Ranking kind of news hit about how can we work with faculty to increase the visibility of their scholarship. And we sort of introduced ORCID IDs, but we didn't really push them that hard because it was kind of a hard sell on, we really need to be focusing on your Hein profile, and here's this other thing, ORCID, but nobody's really using it yet. So again, it was a best practice, but not really that impactful at the moment that we thought. But then when I read about the Hein and ORCID integration, that I think really changed my mind. And so I don't know if, I wrote a blog post about it, and I wanted to share that with you. And I think it's also in the notes from our agenda. So I'm gonna just kind of walk through what that blog post said, right? So we know that Hein integrated its author profiles with ORCID. That was announced, and we've talked about that. That I think is, again, potentially a really big deal for a couple of reasons. So what we know about the US News Scholarly Impact Ranking, there's some things we don't know, but we do know that US News is proposing this new measure. We haven't seen it yet. But what it's going to do is using citations, publications, and other bibliographic or bibliometric measures, it's going to try and measure law faculty productivity and scholarly impact ranking. We don't know when it's going to be released. We don't know exactly what is going to be counted or how it's going to be calculated. But we do know that Hein is providing US News with publication and citation data from its extensive database of law-related periodicals. We also know that Hein's, as wonderful as Hein's content is, and I am a huge fan of Hein, it generally does not include multidisciplinary works. And for a faculty like ours at the University of Wisconsin, who is heavily into multidisciplinary scholarship, that was really concerning. So that's why I think this integration is potentially a pretty big deal. As Aaron was mentioning, first of all, it's helping Hein solve, or it's helping solve the author name ambiguity problem. So for those of us that were involved with sending our list of faculty members to US News and then trying to make sure that everybody's author profile was accurate. This was a lot of work, and I think definitely ORCID integration, which essentially, as I'm assuming most of you know, is sort of like a social security number for an author, right? It's an individual ID number that identifies authors. So you know, Bob Smith, there can be a million Bob Smiths, but there's only Bob Smith, you know, with that one particular ORCID ID number, which again helps solve the name ambiguity problem. But I think even the bigger thing that what this integration can do is it creates a two-way data flow between Hein and ORCID, so that scholarship appearing in one can be shared with the other, right? So what that essentially means, and it took me a while to digest. I'm like, does this mean what I think it means? And it does. I think it does, because I talked to Shane Marmion, president of William S. Hein, and from what I'm understanding, that means, so for scholarly works, so all those multidisciplinary works that are not available in Hein, you will be able to pull metadata from those works, can be pulled into Hein, into the author profile page in Hein. So we're now going to be able to get a lot of that multidisciplinary scholarship, the metadata about it. So not the full text, but the metadata about that scholarship is going to be able to be pulled into Hein, the author profile page into Hein with this ORCID integration, which I think is really exciting. So according to Shane, he said this is a two-phase process, right? Phase one is right now, you can already do this. It's the Hein to ORCID, right? So an author can say, okay, here's my Hein author profile. I want you, by establishing this connection, I want ORCID to pick up everything that's in Hein, right? So every article that I've published that is appearing in my Hein author profile will now also show up in my ORCID profile, which is great. But I think the phase two is what I'm particularly excited about. And according to Shane, he thought in the next couple of months, so maybe around July, there's gonna be a two-way street, which means that the content and about the scholarship that is in an author's ORCID ID profile will now be able to be pulled into Hein, so making that a two-way street. And both of those things are going to be opt-in. Again, so all of that multidisciplinary stuff that hasn't been in Hein before, if you take the time to curate your ORCID profile, you're going to be able to pull all that content in now to Hein Online and be getting a lot of that multidisciplinary content, which I think is super exciting. So what does that mean for the US News ranking? That means that all of that content from ORCID could potentially be included in the data sent to US News from Hein, right? So that's including the number of publications. So if you, like my faculty, have, again, a lot of multidisciplinary publications, the counts for those publications could theoretically, and hopefully will be, pulled in to the data sent to US News. It also includes the number of citations to those publications, right? Because according to Shane, what they're trying to do is to be able to count citations to those works from ORCID, so those multidisciplinary works, from full text content in Hein Online. So what that means is if there are, it addresses the issue of lost citations to multidisciplinary works, right? So if there's a multidisciplinary work and metadata is getting pulled into Hein Online, it allows Hein Online to be able to say, okay, here's this law review article that cited this multidisciplinary work. And in theory, that citation would then be counted. What it doesn't solve is the multidisciplinary citations to other multidisciplinary works, right? So if the work, if the citation is not in a work that's already in Hein, it can't count that. But this at least solves the one issue of lost citations to multidisciplinary works. So we've already, I think Sheila kind of covered this already. So essentially, what does this mean for authors? Definitely, I would advise authors to go in and create an ORCID ID if they haven't done that yet. And like Erin said, this is like, it takes like 5 minutes. It's very easy. That's the easy part. Then you want to have them connected up with Hein Online, right? And I think Sheila showed a screen on how to do that. Again, pretty easy. then the work, I think the thing that takes a little bit more work is then to go in and curate that author, that ORCID profile, to add other works to it. You might need to clean some things up. I did find, at least with my own profile, there were things with multiple DOIs. So the same article had two DOIs, one that was coming from Hein and another one that was coming from SSRN. So I had to go in and do some cleanup and merge those together. Then I had to add some work manually. So although it's quite easy to create a profile, it does take some more work to curate that profile. And frankly, some of our authors probably are just, they're not going to know how, or they just wouldn't. They just don't have the time. So that means that I think this is where the law librarian delegates come in, right? So librarians can now, as trusted individuals, help faculty work through beefing up and curating their ORCID ID profiles. So I think the first step there would be for the law librarian to create an ORCID ID for themselves. So even if they've never actually written anything, you're going to need an ORCID ID for yourself to be able to become a trusted individual. So then once you've got your ID, go to your faculty member and get them to add you as a trusted individual in ORCID. And again, that's pretty easy to do. It shouldn't take them a lot of effort. And then again, connecting up that Hein author profile to ORCID, and then adding in curating additional works, right? And that's the part that could potentially be a large amount of work. For those that were involved with kind of curating the Hein profiles, this, again, potentially a huge amount of work. So I think you want to make sure and be strategic with this. Maybe like for us, we have some faculty members who are extremely prolific with multidisciplinary works. We probably, would probably start with some of those faculty members. And then, work, kind of get the low hanging fruit and the really fruitful fruit first, and then kind of work through the other faculty members as you are able. So I was strategizing with some of my colleagues at the University of Wisconsin. We were sort of thinking this would be a really great summer project. Now that a lot of us, well, probably most of us, are working remotely. This is something that can be done remotely through Zoom meetings or just phone calls with faculty members. So I think I'm going to encourage my staff that this is something, I think it's time, right? The time for ORCID IDs has come, and the time to really help our faculty be strategic and get their works out there, and hopefully to get some of those citations and publication numbers counted. I think this is a really good way to do it. So that's what I had. So if there are any questions, I'd be happy to take them. Otherwise, I will turn it back over to Sheila.
Awesome. Thanks, Bonnie. And we did have a question come in asking if the slides could be shared. So I will connect with you and Erin to get the slides, and I'll send those out with the recording as well and the notes. But yeah, if anybody does have questions or comments, feel free to go ahead and unmute and pipe up, or you can type into the chat. I'll give everybody a second to kind of digest everything we've just heard.
I can pipe in on something that Bonnie had said.
Okay.
That is really largely true about the ORCID profile, is that if you don't leverage what ORCID profiles offer in terms of the APIs and interoperability, then it does just become another profile that you have to manage manually. So the way I'm viewing ORCID and the way I'm rolling it out and planning it is that it's going to be this central hub of metadata, where the whole goal is that human interaction and human data entry will not occur on the profile. Now, it will happen in some limited sense when people want to manually curate it, but at least in my experience, not many faculty get very excited about doing that.
No.
And so I really am trying to leverage ORCID's interoperability with other platforms, which is growing by the day almost. To kind of stage these profiles so that we can use them. We as librarians and metadata specialists can use them to query into and feed out from in a more systematic way. And so that's my view of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm seeing some people typing into the chat box. There is a question, what about books and making sure that those books are included? It is possible to add books as entries in ORCID. Books they don't typically have DOIs, for example, but it is possible. That was going to kind of lead into the next part of this call, which was some guidance and insight on how to start making sure that data, as much data as possible, is populated in the ORCID record, so that when the time comes for Hein Online to pull that data from ORCID into the author profiles, it's more robust and accurate. So I'll talk about that in just a minute. I'm also seeing some additional comments. I'm not sure if we can get to all of them right now, but do know that these will be addressed, if not on this call, afterward. Let's see, will Hein be integrating the citations to the additional materials that are imported into the Hein profiles from ORCID? That is, I think, the understanding right now is that any items that are not already in Hein Online, if they're in ORCID, when that phase 2 comes, and we're thinking sometime around July, stay tuned for more. But yes, that those additional items, citations, will be pulled into Hein Online. Great question, Christine. Whose responsibility will it be to make sure that the citations to these other works are accurate? I think that is kind of an open question, open for discussion.
Sorry, can I just
yeah,
clarify my first question? Hey, everybody.
Yeah.
So basically the question is, if we're importing things from ORCID, are there going to be citation counts within Hein? Because like that's the appeal of it, right? If you're able to list all of the books, all of the articles, potentially even blog posts or any of that stuff, if all of that is in the ORCID profile and then that is exported into Hein and lives in the Hein profile as well, it gives a more complete picture, even if you're only pulling the citations to those works from the body, the law journal collection within Hein. So it gives a bit of a more complete picture, although not perfect. So that's the question, because I mean, otherwise you're just bouncing metadata from one platform to another without actually getting the impact of it.
I can speak to that. That was the question that I had for Shane. And I can read to you what he responded to me. He said, one thought is that for publications which are listed in an ORCID profile and not included in Hein, that since we would have a feed of these publications, we could try to count citations to these works from full text content in Hein Online, such as by a search for book title and author in the text. Again, this is very preliminary thoughts at the moment, and this was when I talked to him back in February. So yeah, that is right, to be able to do a search, a book, book title and author search in the text for those citations. So that was the plan at that time.
I'll just chime in here. This is Shane. I'm here, so I'm listening. So just to confirm with Bonnie and to answer Christine's, yes. So the first phase is and again, the reasons why we did the ORCID integration was obviously Hein can count content within the Hein Online database, and there's books and treatises and things that we don't have licenses for that we can't count because it's not in the framework of Hein Online. But what the ORCID integration brings us the opportunity to do, and this is with this next integration of bringing in data if it's populated within the ORCID account, is it gives us access to those publications for the faculty beyond what's in the Hein Online platform. So while the citation counts won't come immediately with July, it would be a future planned phase. We would have to expand our citation analysis to work with that metadata from ORCID, but it's absolutely it was one of our incentives and reasons why we did that integration.
Awesome, thank you, Shane.
Yep.
I'm seeing some other questions here, a couple around the visibility or being able to make data public or not in ORCID. So I'll talk about that in just a minute. And then also some questions around timing Since the plan for the two-way data flow with ORCID and Hein Online is planned for July, should we wait until that's live? I would say it's never too early to, reach out to your faculty about ORCID, get them started with the ORCID record, at least get them registered and connected to Hein, and then start looking at how to get that data that's not already in Hein Online into the ORCID record, which leads me into the next part of the call. So I'm going to share my screen again, but do feel free to continue pasting questions and comments into the chat. Each one will be addressed. If not on the call today, then you'll either get a follow-up email from me, or it might become an agenda item on a future call. But yeah, so as Bonnie mentioned, the next step is, this is just an example, like here we're seeing works that were added by New York University to somebody's ORCID record. So ultimately, if those are not already in Hein, they will be able to get pulled in there. So kind of rounding out the accuracy there. So there are actually a couple of different ways to get data into the ORCID record. The first, and here I'm just looking at our agenda document. So as you already know, starting with that Hein Online integration is a great way to get data already populated, and then you can just kind of check that off your list. But for all that information that's not in Hein Online, and I've got links in the document here, the individual can add their works themselves to their ORCID record. I've heard from many people that law faculty especially are maybe not the likely candidate group to do all this work themselves, but it is possible to do that. This is, and you'll see in the agenda, the link to this document, which is an instruction manual on the different ways you can add works. If the work has a DOI or other identifier, you can actually add a work directly by just pasting that identifier in. And so that points to yet another reason why starting to use more DOIs in law scholarship is going to be really helpful to people. Go back to that initial landing page. Some of you may be familiar with BibTech. If your faculty have a Google Scholar profile, for example, and there are maybe works listed on their Google Scholar that are not in their Hein Online, it is possible from Google Scholar to basically download a BibTech file and then upload that into ORCID. So that's another kind of roundabout way. If the systems are not directly connected, you can use a BibTech file to upload works into an ORCID record. And of course, you can add works manually. So if it's a book or something, that's probably going to be the route that you take. ORCID also, in the works section of the ORCID record, there are a number of what we call search and link wizards. So these are databases, and they're all listed here, that are connected within ORCID. So if I know that I have works in any one of these databases, I can go in and connect. The two probably most likely areas that you would want to go for law scholarship, although if it's interdisciplinary, depending on what the other discipline areas are, you might be able to find works in some of these others. But I just want to highlight that again, Crossref metadata search and DataCite, these are the two main organizations that mint DOIs. And so anything that has a DOI will probably be found in one of these two. And these two also, once you make the initial connection, you can allow it to do auto updates. So if you publish something in the future that has a DOI, it can get automatically added to your ORCID record for you, as long as your ORCID ID is in the metadata of that publication. So again, this is, for example, my ORCID record. If I go down to the works section, you'll see that if I click on add works, there are a number of different ways that I can do this. And the search and link is what will take you to the search and link wizards for these different databases. So I think it was Bonnie who mentioned it's a good idea, if you don't already have your ORCID ID, to get one so you can start experimenting with this. so that then when you're helping your faculty, you can have a little bit better of an understanding. And another reason why you would want your own ORCID ID if you don't already have one is because of, I believe both Erin and Bonnie mentioned this, if you have an ORCID ID, then your faculty can designate you as a trusted individual to make changes to their ORCID record for them. So to do the designated trusted individual, when your faculty is logged into their ORCID record, they would click on this tab up here and go to account settings. And I've got a link to, I think, in the agenda document. But in the account settings tab of the ORCID record, you'll see that there's a section for trusted organizations and there's a section for trusted individuals. And for trusted individuals, you can enter the person's name, their email address, or their ORCID ID. And as long as they have an ORCID ID, they will appear in the list. So you would type in the person's name. I'm going to use my colleague Shauna as an example. You'll do a search, and you might want to click on the ORCID ID just to make sure it is in fact the right person. But basically, you would just click add, and then Shauna, for example, would be able, when she logs into her ORCID record, she could have access to mine and do all the adding of works and all that kind of stuff for me. So that's one approach. If your faculty are very resistant to doing this themselves, they can set you or another staff person or their assistant or a student worker, somebody who is a trusted individual, to update their ORCID record for them. So that's another approach. That's the trusted individual approach. And then last but not least, and actually this approach of having organizations adding data to faculty's ORCID records for them is really the ideal scenario, because this would be leveraging the ORCID API or application programming interface, which is essentially the kind of back-end systems that would allow data to be transferred from one system to the other without you or your faculty having to do these manual entries of these works. So we do have, I know that you know, it varies across the board in terms of the different systems that everyone is using at your institution. I do want to make everyone aware of a few things related to this aspect. Right now, there are two major common vendor systems that are for research information and tracking research information that do have integrations with the ORCID API that allow for writing data from these systems to an ORCID record. And right now, those two are Symplectic Elements and Pure, which is an Elsevier product. If your institution is using one of these, then you're an excellent candidate for leveraging that. If you're not using one of these, I'll talk about a few other options and things that are in the works. But if you're a part of a larger campus, and let's say, because I know, you know, in many cases, the law school is, you know, very separate from the campus at large. But you may check and see if your larger campus is using one of these systems, and you may be able to work out some sort of partnership where you can use these for your law faculty. But these are two systems that are vendor systems that are already set up to do this. I did take a look at my list because I am working with institutions that are already ORCID members. And so this is a list of institutions that are ORCID members that are using Pure. So if you're at one of these institutions, definitely reach out to me. I had pasted my email address in the chat, and it's also in the agenda, but I can put you in touch with the people that administer Pure if you're not already in touch with them. So if you're at any one of these institutions, you could potentially use Pure. I did the similar thing for Symplectic Elements. So if you see your institution on this list somewhere, you may be in luck in terms of getting a shortcut to kind of add more information to your researchers' ORCID records. these are some of the other systems that I have heard law schools are using, vendor systems to manage data information about your faculty's research and their scholarship. In the agenda, you will see that we do have email templates for reaching out to these vendors. So right now, these systems are not integrated with ORCID, but if they were, it would make so many people's lives easier. The thing about working with vendors is that they really want to hear from their customers and their users with requests for adding new functionality. They probably wouldn't listen to me if I said, hey, you need to add ORCID. They'd be like, well, you're not a customer. We want to hear from our actual customers. So that's why I created some email templates that you can, if you're using one of these systems, you can just copy that email template, plug in your name, and send it to your representative from these vendors, because the goal would be to get all of these systems integrated with ORCID. That way, if you already have data in these systems, you could push it to ORCID. That would make so many people's lives easier. So do look at that in the agenda. There's a link to the email templates. If you're using a system that I haven't talked about yet, please type it into the chat. Let me know. I'm trying to really provide support for this effort. So anything I can do to help get systems integrated and help you figure out how you might be able to use ORCID will be on my radar. And then finally, I wanted to, I know this is a big list, but these are all of our ORCID members. So if you are at an institution that is affiliated with one of these organizations, then your institution is already an ORCID member. So basically the ORCID member institutions have access to 5 ORCID API keys that would allow you to integrate ORCID into various systems. So you may have a smoother road if you're working with other stakeholders on your campus. If you're part of one of these institutions, there are already other people on campus working on ORCID stuff, thinking about ORCID. So definitely, if you don't know who those people are at your institution, email me. I can put you in touch with them. But also, I would love to hear from everybody just to talk about your context at your institution, what systems you're using, how you are collecting data, what your roadblocks are, what your challenges are. We're all in this together, and the goal is to make life easier for everyone. We're definitely not in the ideal scenario right now, but that's where we're moving. So do know that I'm here to support you. I'm going to take that down for a second. I just want to make sure we're covering everything. We are coming up to the end, but yeah, you'll see that I've got these email templates. Also down in the helpful resources, I've got links to things. I've got an email template for reaching out to your law faculty. You can take this, you can adapt it, but you can, send emails out to your faculty if you need help, promoting ORCID. This is the kind of thing that I am here to provide support for. So if you have ideas, if you have specific things that would be helpful, let me know. Don't be shy. I would love to hear from you. And I've seen that a lot of people are typing in the chat, but before I go and look at that, I want to make sure that everybody is aware that there are 99 people on the call right now. And so we're not going to have time to do a full discussion, but it would really be helpful. I've got this survey, and let me actually paste the link into the chat. Because the more that we can get an understanding of what the different systems are that are being used, oops, something's going wrong. And what your workflows are, the more we can, look for solutions to streamline these workflows. So please do fill out the survey. It's going to take not that long, 5-10 minutes, depending on how much you already know about the systems you're using and what have you. Oh, that went privately. Let me put it to everyone. Okay. So please take some time to do that survey that I just posted. Also, again, contact me. My email address is sheila.rabin@lyrasis.org. I will be sending out the call notes that I took, the recording from today, and the slides from our presenters, so stand by for that. I'll also, we'll definitely include like the link to the vendor email templates and all those helpful resources, but do please consider sending those, because that's really the only way that vendors are going to add ORCID functionality into their systems, is if they hear from their customers. And Bonnie already outlined a lot of really great next steps, but thinking about working with your faculty to at least get their ORCID ID and link it to Hein Online as a first step. And the great thing about the Hein Online integration is the faculty can hopefully see the benefit right away when they see, oh, all I had to do was connect this, click a button, and now my works are in my ORCID record. That's amazing. And soon it will be also able to go the other way. So wonderful. And like I said, talk to other internal stakeholders at your institution about ORCID. If your library is separate from the main library, those other librarians are going to be able to help and provide insight. And increasingly, you know, people in like the research office, sponsored programs, other academic units, it really is a campus-wide thing. It's not just in one area. So the more you can communicate with other stakeholders at your institution about ORCID, the better. Really, it is more the merrier. The more people and systems using ORCID, the more everyone can benefit from it. And also, back to Erin's point, also thinking about how we can use DOIs more in all of these workflows, I think would also be very helpful. With that, would people be interested in doing another one of these calls, or regular calls around these topics, or zeroing in on specific aspects, like actually walking through the process of adding works? If you have any kind of desire to do this more and get together and talk more, future calls may be less presentation oriented, so we can actually have more real discussion. But definitely, you know, type into the chat or unmute and share your thoughts and what would be helpful to you. But I hope this was at least somewhat helpful. Okay.
You know, I would be happy to demonstrate how to actually create a DOI if anyone's interested in that technical process. I mean, there's a little bit of technical knowledge required if you want to do it all by hand and mechanically in like a code editor, but Crossref has actually provided some web form tools that make it slightly easier to do it one by one. And so I'd be happy to review that kind of thing. And I'd like to flag for everybody's consideration that there's a weird kind of feedback loop in the way law scholarship is published, in that a lot of us look to the Blue Book to figure out kind of like what the standards are in citation for legal scholarship. And so I'd want everyone to know that I'm actually pursuing discussions with the Blue Book to update their perspective on DOI and ORCID. So the new volume has already been set for publication. So these changes are going to be probably set in the next volume coming out. So not the one that's about to be released for this year, but the one that's going forward. So if we can all as a community get together behind this kind of idea, then we will be ready to hit the ground running once the Blue Book kind of acknowledges that what the DOI is and also ORCID.
Wonderful, thanks, Erin. And we are at the hour, so if you have to go, do that, and stay tuned for my follow-up email. I'm going to, all of the questions in the chat that may have went unanswered, I'm going to compile those and include like a Q&A in the email that I sent out so everybody can see answers to those questions. So stand by for that. Any other thoughts, questions, or comments before we conclude for the day?
I would just like to thank Sheila and Erin for putting this together. This has been really helpful.
Wonderful. Yes. Thanks, Bonnie. Thanks, Erin. And thank you all for taking the time to come and chat. I did see some things about how people would be interested in having some future calls. So do stay tuned for that, because I think this would be really helpful. And yeah, just stay tuned for my notes and everything that I'm going to send out after in the recording. But yeah, thanks again, everyone. I hope you have a great rest of your day and the rest of your week, and we'll just stay in touch, and we'll talk again soon.
Thanks, Sheila. Thanks everyone for